Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It is my great pleasure to be again with you all here on this Ekadashi day to celebrate and to absorb and appreciate Srila Prabhupada's wonderful qualities, how he perfectly demonstrated the 26 qualities of a pure devotee. And to do that, I'm very, very pleased to welcome again my friend Siddhanta Prabhu, who is going to be leading us into this realm of exploration by hearing from the devotees who experience these qualities. And this is so relishable. Just to remind everyone, this is part of our series. We're doing this every Ekadashi. So this is today Ekadashi, and then next Ekadashi. So 26 Ekadashis, 26 qualities in 2022. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Siddhanta.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me again and giving me the opportunity to actually do some spiritual homework, because I have, 2,500, 3,000 stories to choose from, and to determine which one of those are highlights of that particular anecdote or experience that the devotee had with Prabhupada that exemplifies the particular quality that we're going to feature on each of those days. So it reminds me of being in college. It's a pleasurable type of homework that compares nowhere to studying the courses that they offer in
Urmila has been conducting a little course. I took part of it, and she said it's home fun, isn't it? Homework.
That's very good. I like that. Exactly. But it's a meditation. It's a great meditation, and yes. Prabhupada one time, was explaining how I think your wife mentioned this story that if you're not in anxiety, then you are nothing but a zombie.
You're a zombie.
Zombie.
Life means you have to have some eagerness to live and do something. And when it's for Krishna, then it's spiritual.
Right. And so spiritual anxiety is a good type of anxiety.
Yeah. Yes.
But we're going to, I have selected 6 stories to listen to, hear the devotees directly on camera that will give us, I think, unique outlooks as to the truth that Prabhupada spoke and the effect that it had on each devotee. Each truth that Prabhupada revealed was significant, different angles of vision that Prabhupada presented at that particular time. We're going to hear from Brajendranandana, Malati devadasi, Revatinandana, who's sadly no longer with us, Jagat Purusa Prabhu, Rangavati devadasi, and Kishor Prabhu from the UK. We'll start with Brajendranandana, who tells a story about the first time he met Prabhupada and the truth that Prabhupada spoke and the significance of that truth that he heard during this first time that he met Prabhupada, and obviously left a lifelong impression on Brajendranandana. So let us hear from Brajendranandana.
I was a college student at Temple University. In 1967, Prabhupada came to visit my college, and he had a few devotees with him, and in those days they used to dance in a circle and chant Hare Krishna. And when Prabhupada spoke, I was so non-conscious that I don't remember a lot of the things he said, but I did remember that he said, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, and no meat eating. And I was thinking, this is 1967, and this person is preaching no intoxication, no illicit sex in the middle of the university campus. He must have integrity. He must not be looking just for money or followers, but really presenting something genuine, because he was going against the current of the material world and what the young students were into. So even though I didn't have a intense experience with Prabhupada, I always carried that feeling of respect that I had from that first meeting.
Hare Krishna. That's perfect. Yes. In a situation where it would be so easy to just, cater to the crowd, so to speak.
Right.
Srila Prabhupada just puts it out there. This
Yeah,
is
no,
the truth.
no sugarcoating in this
No.
philosophy. Just convinced with the absolute truth, and this is
But
how
but
to. Go
but he's
ahead.
also speaking from his, from realization, and he's able to present it in such a way that people like Brajendranandana receive this and with respect and yeah, genuine.
Right. Yeah, this type of preaching in the West, there were other quote unquote gurus or Indian bodied swamis that came to the West, but they were sugarcoating the philosophy, if they even had a philosophy. And but Prabhupada was the real deal, and because he had Krishna on his side and the absolute truth penetrated in this case to Brajendranandana's heart, and realized that this is a bona fide person, bona fide teacher. Not that he surrendered that day, but it stuck in his heart as that the Prabhupada is the bona fide teacher, that if he wants to advance in Krishna consciousness or in spiritual life, then here's one that he can sincerely follow, that he's not going to cheat him.
Yeah.
Right.
Hare
Good.
Krishna.
So now let us listen to Malati devadasi, who also is going to explain, I won't give away her story, but it's a truth that about life that she had never heard before. And she was impressed and found a lot of solace in the truth that Prabhupada spoke on this particular day. So let's hear from Malati.
The very first thing that he said that struck me on that day when he came back from the airport, not only was it the very simple words, but it was the fact that he made it like a very simple statement. I mean, it was without condemnation, without opinion. It was a simple fact. It's like right now, if it was raining and I said, oh, it's raining outside, it would be a simple fact. You may or may not like the rain, but the fact is it would be raining. And in the same way, he said to us, there is no love in this material world. We were all hippies, we're from that generation. And the thrust of the hippie movement, particularly in San Francisco, was love. And not one living entity can say or deny that they are searching for love. I mean, even these little animals here, they can't go without love. If you have an animal in your house and you ignore that animal becomes very despondent. So every living creature in this world needs love, and innately desires to seek and find that love through relationship, through creating a situation with others. But we had all been disappointed. We had all been in love, or almost been in love, or thought we had been in love so many times, only to find the love was gone, the love was lost, the person or the object we love went away. So that very propensity of loving was also bringing a sorrow. And yet that wasn't really what love should be or was supposed to be. So we hadn't found it. And so when he said that, there is no love in this material world, such a simple and profound thing, but it brought about in my heart a great relief. I didn't have to look anymore. I didn't have to think about it anymore. It wasn't there. And it wasn't something that was negative at all, because he went on to explain what was real love. Why we were not finding love was because we didn't understand what was love. and he gave us, of course, the answer through Krishna. But it was like a relief. And that was the one thing that was the very first impression, strong impression.
This is another aspect because, along with hard truths, Srila Prabhupada, what she was explaining is that along with the hard truth, that is like, there's no love in the material world, he gives the soft truth, the beautiful truth, where there is love, and he brings us Krishna. So it's not just a heavy sort of truth, that's like in your face sort of thing, but here it is. It's a reality. It's a fact, but there is a wonderful truth to be understood if you take the time. So that's very beautiful.
Right. Yeah, she explains it very nicely. It struck her heart. And again, like Brajendranandana, that first instruction or lesson from Prabhupada about the truth of love, or what we can expect from the material world and what's there in the spiritual world, she remembered to a T. It stuck with her decades. So it was very significant, that truth that Prabhupada spoke on that day to her. All right, now we're going to hear from Revatinandana, who sadly passed away
yes.
a couple months ago in Hawaii. But a great preacher. He made so many devotees in the UK, especially. I heard classes from him when I was in Denver. He came as a sannyasi then, and just very logical in his explanation of Krishna consciousness. So I was always impressed with him as an individual and as a preacher. So this particular story about a truth that we'll see and hear from him confronts a widely held notion of what is truth amongst the population around the world about who is God and the nature of God. Yes. So let us hear from Revatinandana.
The kirtan ended, and Prabhupada put on his spectacles, and he had what I'm sure must have been his own Srimad Bhagavatam in front of him. This was, of course, long before. This was, again, it was in early '68. It was long before he had actually translated any of it. But he was reading from it, and then he was speaking. And I remember noticing that as he spoke, a lot of times his eyes were closed, or if he was looking out, it was like basically just looking around the room. He didn't seem to be presenting himself or kind of advertising himself or trying to appear as a holy man like I had seen a couple other gurus around that were doing like that. And he seemed like he was very just, I remember noticing he's just speaking this teaching right from this book, and then he's explaining it. I do recall specifically that in that particular lecture he remarked, so now they are saying that everyone is God. You are God, I am God. He said, so there are so many gods laying down in the street. Right? He said, so for you, God does not mean very much if you think that. He said, G-O-D-D-O-G. What is the difference? You say you are God, I say you are a dog. But if we are all God and gods are laying down in the street, then what is the good is no different than being dog. And he talked about the opulences. And that's a paraphrase, obviously. It's not exactly what he said, but I remember that he specifically mentioned G-O-D-D-O-G. And I was going from one viewpoint to the other right at that time, and immediately it just struck me right away that that's right. Obviously, how has God gotten into such a bad spot as so many people like me that were practically almost living in the street at that time, or were living in the street in some cases?
Hare Krishna, yes. G-O-D-D-O-G. Yeah, that particularly in those times, the Bhagavans and I'm God and we're all God, and just piercing through.
Exactly. Just a truth that with Prabhupada, I've always been impressed by Prabhupada's analogies that clarify a particular philosophical point. And this particular story about lying in the street. I mean, even today, there's so much homelessness, and tent cities are going up everywhere. So, that concept that we're all God really doesn't fit with the definition of that we know what is God, full of opulence.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a short, sweet one. We have three more. And the next one is from Jagat Purusa Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Very, very nice devotee. I just saw him here a week ago in Los Angeles.
Oh.
And he's going to tell us a story about a truth that Prabhupada was not willing to hold back. And this is a great example of Prabhupada's preaching the truth with strength that we should all, especially Sankirtan devotees, should take to heart and not be afraid of preaching. So let's hear from Jagat Purusa.
So on one occasion, we were just returning from the morning walk. We were nearing the temple. Dr. Patel was walking and having animated conversations with Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was saying something critical about one of the well-known, figures of the recent history. And Prabhupada was quite critical. And Dr. Patel, as he had done many times, really objected strongly to Srila Prabhupada's criticism. And he was asking Prabhupada, why do you have to criticize? Let them be. You do your thing, let them do their thing. Just leave them alone. Why do you have to criticize them? They are great souls in their own right. So let them just be. If you don't agree with their philosophy, just let them alone. And then Srila Prabhupada stopped. And Prabhupada said that if I'm in an operating room and I'm conducting a operation with a patient, and someone comes into the room and starts cutting my patient, am I going to just stand there and watch it happen? No. I'm going to say, get out! Prabhupada said loudly, get out, you rascal. So I cannot be silent. These rascals and fools have destroyed the culture of India. And therefore I must speak out. And I will speak out. Prabhupada is very, very strong.
Yes. What is it? What is that? That saying? To this. To armed with truth. This is like the sword of truth. Speaking truth. Oh, that was it. Speak truth to power. Right.
Right.
That's a saying from the '60s, isn't it?
It's still being broadcast today. It might have started
it needs to be.
Right.
Speak truth to power. Yeah.
But for Sankirtan devotees or anybody preaching, we should not be ashamed or shy in telling the absolute truth. Yeah. And
of course, we also have to do. We have the other side. I think it was our last show where we had Srila Prabhupada telling the devotees when in a particular, I think it was Gandhi's ashram, to just hold back right now. So there's always the time and the place and the circumstance. Srila Prabhupada had that quality too. When to speak the truth and when to just kind of let it go a little bit. Never to mislead. Never mislead or never go, give some just what they want. But sometimes he would let things go a little bit. And depending on the audience, sometimes.
He had
both are there.
Right. He had a special relationship with Dr. Patel, who would go on those walks in Bombay and Juhu Beach. And so they had a certain relationship, a rasa that was going on there. But so many times Dr. Patel would, side with other people that had different philosophies. But that was his main thrust throughout those morning walks, that he felt that he wasn't happy with Prabhupada's conviction and his, belief in Krishna consciousness, where Dr. Patel wanted to say, well, it's all one, everybody's opinion's
Yeah.
okay. But if it's leading someone down the wrong path, then maybe, we as preachers should, if a child's running out in the street,
Yeah.
even if it's not your own child, you want to go and help that child from danger that's about to,
Yes.
confront with a oncoming car or something like that. And it's actually a law, I think, that if you are aware of somebody in danger and you don't do anything about it, you also can be held responsible.
Yeah.
So this
It's a
is
great
Prabhupada's
example, isn't it?
position. Prabhupada's position is being a doctor. And, he gave that analogy of being in the operating room, performing a surgery. But we're also, his disciples are spiritual doctors to give this transcendental knowledge or help distribute it.
Yeah. And the cutters are all around. Nirvishesha, Sunyavadi, just ready to throw their, cut out the soul, cut out Krishna, just take Krishna out of the picture. We have to stand and fight,
Yeah.
but with discretion. And I found myself in many situations like that where a person who's come and wants to talk and so on, it just starts to bring up various impersonal conclusions.
Mhm.
And it's always, how to find the way to just get at that without being too coming off or be as an arrogant sort of holier than thou, because that would be also because Srila Prabhupada had that quality that even though, like Revatinandana was talking about, that he wasn't making a kind of a pretense of anything or a show, but he was just giving it so that people felt he's not coming from a position of being, presenting himself as someone greater than you and therefore listen to me, but just being the servant and presenting the truth.
We have two more, Rangavati Devadasi. She is going to tell us a story about a truth that we all know, that is a certain basic foundation to Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada has taught us, and that the reason for our chanting Hare Krishna. So I won't go any further. She'll explain it, and we can talk on the other side. So let's listen to Rangavati Devadasi.
In the course of taking care of Manisha, who was only a 13-year-old child at the time, she went through a lot of stages. And her mother, Antajana, had gone to Srila Prabhupada and said, what should I do with her? What's the best thing? And he said, you should simply keep her comfortable. So that was a very loose, kind of direction to go in, because comfortable could mean drugs or medication, or it could mean moving and so many things. So we kind of improvised from that basic direction to go in. So we brought her to the Himalayas in the hot season and did so many things. And the mother's becoming anxious, and she was near dying, and so she really wanted to see Prabhupada to ask, and she was so distraught. So it was just before the evening artik, and Prabhupada was getting ready to go with Harisari, was his servant at the time. So we were able to go in, and there was myself and Antajana, the mother, and the girl, Manisha. So we went in the darshan room, and the mother said, Prabhupada, she said, I don't know what to do, she's dying. And Prabhupada's eyes got, huge, and said, we are all dying. For you, tomorrow, for me, next week, we're all dying. And the way that he said it was like, where have you been? What have I been saying? What have I been preaching? Why did I come here? I came here to show you that we're dying, and it's just a matter of time, and you should chant Hare Krishna. And he was becoming like really kind of almost outraged that this would be a surprise, that you're now dying. we were kind of thinking maybe we'd get some empathy of a different sort, some sympathy, like, oh, I'm so sorry, but there was nothing. He cut to the chase immediately. There wasn't any type of soft pedaling, nothing like that, just right to it. And it really kind of threw us all back. And so Manisha was having a really hard time chanting, as you would. You know, she's 13, she's a bag of bones, and she didn't want to chant 16 rounds every day. So she asked Srila Prabhupada, you know, what should I do? You know, what'll happen to me if I don't chant 16 rounds? And he said, you'll be born, you know, in an aristocratic family or educated and wealthy, you know. But he said, chant Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. That's a truthfulness that the simple truth.
Yes.
The simple truth that we are not our bodies on the one side, and we're all dying. The body is dying, but we live on. Yeah, I mean, that was Srila Prabhupada could do that. He could do that, and that's because he could see what was needed at the time.
Right.
He needed to just wake up and confront. In death, there's this this denial, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you have, and it seems that he was approaching that you're in denial. You know, you should know that you've been listening, you've been hearing all along, and now you're what to do. You don't know.
Yeah,
Chant
taking
Hare
medicine.
Krishna.
Yeah.
Chant Hare Krishna.
Well, from the Mahabharata, we also know that is the most amazing thing about Maya. When
Yes.
the four Pandavas were dead from the poisonous lake, and then Yudhishthira had to answer the riddle. What is the most amazing thing about Maya? And he answers that we see our relatives around us dying, we see friends around us dying, but we think that we will never die.
Yeah.
And then another example, Prabhupada, is even somebody's in a hospital in their deathbed, they might be thinking, well, I'm going to die, but not today.
Yes.
So we're always holding out hope that, well, it won't be now. So that is Maya. But he was cutting, like the surgeon was cutting out some and cutting out their denial or their inability to remember what Prabhupada came here to teach us. So that was very strong message that he delivered to them. But at the end, with compassion, he then went to the young girl and said, well, things will, you'll progress. He wasn't, harsh in that, but he was compassionate at the same time. So let's finish up with Kishor. And he is, this is, all these are like top 10 for me. So, but this one is also definitely in the top 10 of the memory series. Very unique story, very memorable, and teaches us also a lesson about truthfulness that Prabhupada exhibited here. And without fear that when he faced this particular individual, a confrontational type of meeting that Prabhupada had in a temple. So let's hear from Kishor.
We're in Berry Place Temple. Prabhupada's just given a lecture and it's packed. Berry Place temple room was small. Relatively speaking, it was small. Shyam Sundar had made a magnificent job of building it into something that was otherworldly. The temple room in Berry Place was just otherworldly, but it was small. And when it was packed, the condensation would drip from the ceiling and so forth. Prabhupada had just finished his talk and said, "Are there any questions?" And immediately an Indian lady who visited quite frequently to do service. She was a frequent visitor, but she was an individual at the same time. She kept herself to herself and was quite argumentative with devotees. Strangely enough, she liked being there, but she was a very argumentative. So Prabhupada said, question, are there any questions? She stood up immediately and said, Swami, can you see God? It was quite challenging. And I thought, And Prabhupada said immediately, yes, you cannot. Then he looked around like this, Krishna is everywhere. Why you cannot see? And Prabhupada didn't need to say anything else. For me, I realized everything in that moment for me. That Krishna, he's everywhere. So if I can't see him, I got to start working. I got to do something. He's everywhere. So he said, why you cannot see? And there was silence. And she was still standing. And Prabhupada was staring. Not staring like this, but gazing affectionately. Why? You cannot see. And she didn't know what to say. Silence. More silence. And they're just looking at each other. So then Prabhupada says, do you want to see? And the silence again, as she looks down at her feet and shakes her head like this. Then Prabhupada says loudly, therefore you cannot see. And if he said anything else, I can't remember. I was just stunned at how he dealt with this situation. At first it was a challenge. Swami, can you see God? Immediately, yes. You cannot? Krishna is everywhere. Why you cannot see? And then, do you want to see? No. Therefore you, and I almost saw the lightning come out, or whatever energy it was, come out of his finger when he said that to this lady. And she almost crumbled onto the floor. She got pranams like this. She didn't want to ask anything else. She'd heard what Prabhupada had. She'd heard what she needed to hear from Prabhupada, so she sat down. Like I say, if there's anything else after that, Prabhupada may have said more. I don't remember. I had what I had got from that. It was unbelievable. Massive experience. Prabhupada could say more in one word or in a couple of words than you could read in a book of philosophy sometimes. That was another thing that took me about Prabhupada. His way with words, his expertise in not misusing one word or using any words unnecessarily to get his point across. And sometimes, as with that lady, even he used the silence to speak volumes, because there were big pauses between Krishna is everywhere, why you cannot see, and then nothing, silence, silence. It was remarkable. I'd never seen anyone like this before, and of course never, ever will again. So I'm glad that I remembered that one, because that's usually, if people say, can you tell us some Prabhupada memories? Usually that's the one I start with, that, and the way that lady was humbled.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
It's a classic story.
Very, very, yeah, it is certainly. It is certainly. Yeah. He was challenged many times about seeing God and so on. And he always answered in such amazing ways. But in this particular instance, like you said, this is, the truth, like the not just the main truth that he's bringing out is the truth of this, of all of us, the need for our desire, that the only thing standing in the way of us seeing Krishna is our own desire to see Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Right. Anyway, I hope devotees can relish some of those stories and maybe repeat them for their friends, family, and god brothers, god sisters. So, Shravanam Kirtanam Smaranam.
Thank you so much.
Anyway, thank you for inviting me.
And so we're continuing in a couple of weeks. On the next Ekadashi, we'll have the next quality. And in the meantime, everyone should please go to prabhupadmemories.com and subscribe and get all of this. Now you have your YouTube channel as well. And just immerse yourself in this wonderful, wonderful connection with Srila Prabhupada and his qualities, because those qualities teach us. It's not just the books teach us, but then his own personal qualities teach us.
The Acharya.
Thank you again, and thank you to everyone. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Hare Krishna.